Picture this. You're a kid running around in the woods with your friends,
Yeah.
and you come across this big old tree. And you know what kids are like. You might even want to climb it. But up in the branches, instead of a bird's nest, there's a human skull. That's kind of the starting point for the mystery we're looking at today, back in 1943 in Hagley Woods, England. And the question that's been bugging people for over 80 years is this. Who put Bella in the wych elm?
It does grab you right from the start, doesn't it? Almost like the first line of a spooky story. And this story's got it all twists and turns, dead ends. We've got wartime stuff going on, whispers of spies, even a bit of the occult. And all this happening in a place that's already full of spooky stories. It's really a story that just pulls you in.
And that's what we're going to try and unpack today. Right. We've got some really interesting stuff to help us figure this out. Old news articles from back then, historical accounts that try to explain what happened. Even a podcast episode from a few years back where they talked about this exact case after they covered it years before. We're not just going to look at what happened, but also how people have seen this mystery change over time.
What I find really interesting is how those later interpretations, like the podcast we're going to talk about, add more to the story without actually getting us closer to the truth. It's like they tell us as much about how we're fascinated by true crime and unsolved mysteries as they do about the actual case itself.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. April 1943, World War II is in full swing, and everyone in England is on edge. These four boys, they decide to go poaching in Hagley Woods. Maybe looking for a way to forget about the war for a bit. They find this wych elm tree, and one of them climbs up, probably expecting to find some birds' nests. But instead, he finds himself staring at a human skull.
And that's when things get real. This isn't just some ghost story you tell around a campfire. This is about a real person, a mystery that needs to be solved. So the police get involved, and what do they find? A nearly complete skeleton inside the tree, a shoe, a gold wedding ring, pieces of clothing, all pointing to the fact that this was a person, not just some random bones.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yep.
Who was this woman? What happened to her? And why was she hidden in a tree?
And those are the exact questions that have kept investigators and just regular people who love mysteries hooked for decades.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Right from the start, the investigation was slowed down because of the war.
So even with the discovery as gruesome as this life just went on.
Pretty much. Imagine trying to solve a murder while bombs are falling and the world is in chaos. Kind of puts things in perspective, right? The police did what they could. They figured out that the woman, they call her Bella, had probably died about 18 months earlier, most likely from suffocation. But who she was remained a complete mystery.
So for a year and a half, she was hidden inside that tree, a silent witness to all the craziness going on outside. It's both sad and kind of eerie. It's like time stopped inside that tree while everything outside was falling apart.
That's a really poetic way to put it. And I think that sense of stillness, of a secret hidden in plain sight, that's part of what makes this case so fascinating.
But then a few years later, things take an even stranger turn. Graffiti starts popping up around the area where they found Bella, always asking the same question. Who put Bella in the wych elm?
That graffiti, it's really something. It's like a challenge or maybe a desperate plea. Someone out there is trying to keep Bella's memory alive, but they're also reminding everyone that this case is still unsolved. It's like they're saying, we haven't forgotten, have you?
It definitely adds to the mystery,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Like someone out there knows something, but they're not quite ready to spill the beans. Did the police ever look into the graffiti? I mean, maybe it could have helped them find a suspect.
Oh, they did, but it never led to anything concrete. It remained this frustratingly vague piece of the puzzle, this whisper in the dark that kept the case alive in people's minds.
And then in 1953, a full 10 years after Bella's remains were found, things really start to heat up. A journalist named Wilfred Jones, who had been following the case, gets a letter that completely changes everything.
This letter adds a whole new level of complexity to the story. Now, it's not just about who Bella was or how she died. It's about secrets, lies, and the possibility that her death was tied to something much bigger than anyone initially thought.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Tell me more about this letter.
The letter was signed simply Anna, and it claimed that Bella was murdered because she was involved with a group of Nazi spies operating right there in the Midlands during the war.
Wait a minute. Nazi spies in the English countryside? That sounds like something out of a movie. How likely is that, really?
It's more likely than you might think. Remember, this was wartime. The Midlands were a busy hub with factories churning out weapons and other important war supplies. The Nazis would have been desperate to disrupt that, and spies would have been crucial to their plans.
So this Anna, she's saying that Bella got caught up in this world of espionage. What exactly did she say happened?
Well, Jones and Anna exchanged a few letters, and eventually she revealed her full name, Una Mossop. And then she laid out this very detailed story of what she believed happened to Bella. According to Una, her husband Jack worked at one of those munitions factories, and he had gotten involved with a Dutch Nazi agent who was operating in the area.
So now we have a possible motive.
Mm-hmm.
Bella was part of this spy ring, something went wrong, and she ended up dead. It's starting to feel like one of those classic film noir stories with secrets and betrayals around every corner.
It does add a whole new layer of intrigue, right? And it brings up so many questions. What was Bella's role in all of this? Was she a willing participant, or did she get caught up in something she didn't understand? And what exactly happened that led to her death? Una's letter gives us some possible answers, but it also opens up a whole can of worms. Una's story, it's both fascinating and kind of frustrating. It gives us a possible explanation for Bella's death, but it's also full of vagueness and unanswered questions. It's like she's giving us a peek through a window. But the window's all foggy. We can see shapes and shadows, but the details are blurry.
So what exactly did Una say happened that night in 1942?
Well, according to her, Jack was giving information to this Dutch agent, and Bella was involved somehow too, although it's not clear exactly what she was doing. One night, Jack the agent and Bella were in a car together, and they got into an argument, things got out of hand, and the agent ended up strangling Bella.
Wow, that's awful. And Jack, what did he do?
Una claimed that Jack was horrified and terrified for his own life, so he helped the agent hide Bella's body in the wych elm, hoping to cover up the crime and save himself. But the guilt and fear really got to him. According to Una, he had a nervous breakdown, soon after was put in an institution and died later that year.
It's a sad story for sure. But some things don't quite add up. Are there any records to back up Una's claims? Did this Jack Mossop even exist? Was there really a Dutch agent operating in the area?
That's where Una's story starts to fall apart. Despite a lot of research and investigation, no one has ever found any records to support what she said. There's no trace of Jack Mossop in any official documents. The Dutch agent she described has never been identified. And without any proof, it's impossible to say for sure if Una was telling the truth or making it all up.
So we're back where we started, with more questions than answers. Was Una lying to protect her husband's reputation even after he was dead? Or did she truly believe what she was saying? Maybe she misremembered things or exaggerated details over time. It really makes you think about how unreliable memory can be and how our perceptions can be influenced by time trauma, or even just our need to make sense of terrible things.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that makes this case so intriguing, right? It forces us to confront the fact that memory can be flawed, that truth can be subjective, and that sometimes the answers we're looking for might just not be out there.
And it's not just Una's account that's problematic. Remember how Bella's body was found inside the tree? Well, the actual location of her remains is unknown today, which means DNA testing and modern forensic analysis are out of the question. We're left with these intriguing clues, but no way to definitively prove or disprove any of the theories.
And that brings up a really interesting point. Why does this particular mystery continue to fascinate us after all these years? Is it the wartime setting, the whispers of spies and the occult? Or is it just our basic human desire to find answers to make sense of something senseless?
I think it's probably a mix of all those things. There's just something about an unsolved mystery that draws us in, that makes us want to piece together the clues and come up with our own explanations. It's like a puzzle we can't resist trying to solve, even if we know some of the pieces are missing.
And in a way, that's a reflection of how we approach the world in general. We're always trying to figure things out, to find patterns and connections, even when we don't have all the information, or when the information we have is contradictory.
Speaking of trying to figure things out, you mentioned earlier that we'd be looking at a podcast episode where they revisited the Bella case.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about that?
It's from the podcast My Favorite Murder, and the hosts Karen and Georgia first talked about Bella's case back in 2016. Then a few years later, they revisited it because their listeners were still so interested and because the mystery remained unsolved.
So they got pulled back into the case just like we are.
Exactly. And that's what I find so interesting about their episode. It's not just them rehashing the same facts, it's them reflecting on why this mystery is still so powerful, how it keeps resonating with people decades later, and how difficult it is to deal with a case that's so shrouded in time and ambiguity.
What were their main takeaways? Did they lean towards any particular theory?
They were really drawn to the spy angle, just like we were. They spent a lot of time talking about the possibility of a Nazi spy ring operating in the Midlands. They also explored the occult theories, like the connection to the Hand of Glory, which is supposed to be this mummified hand with magical powers. It's pretty gruesome, but it adds to the mystique of the case.
It ties back to the name of the tree itself, the wych elm. It sounds like something straight out of a Gothic horror story.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes this case so captivating. It blends reality and folklore history and imagination in a way that's both creepy and fascinating. The hosts even joked about wanting to do a special episode if the case is ever solved, which just shows how much the story has gotten under their skin.
So even for people who are really into true crime, this case is something special. It's not just another murder mystery. It's a story that gets its hooks in you and doesn't let go.
Absolutely. And it raises questions that go beyond the specific details of the case, questions about what truth really is the power of storytelling and how we try to make sense of the unknown.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about the location itself, Hagley Woods. We've mentioned the Witch Elm and the Hand of Glory, but the woods themselves have a long history and tons of folklore. And I can't help but think that plays a part in the mystery of this case.
That's a great point. Places often have a sort of collective memory, a feeling of the events that have happened there. And Hagley Woods, with its ancient trees, winding paths, and its proximity to Witchbury Hill, which is full of legends and folklore. It definitely has an aura of mystery that adds to the intrigue of Bella's story.
And did you know the name Bella that kept appearing in the graffiti? It turns out Bella is also a local term for a witch.
Really? That's incredible. It's like the location itself was trying to give us clues, trying to lead us to the truth.
I know, right? And it makes you wonder what other secrets Hagley Woods might be hiding.
Oh, I'm definitely curious what specifically caught your attention about the history and folklore of Hagley Woods.
Well, for one thing, the woods have a long association with witchcraft and pagan rituals. The name witch in Witch Elm is actually believed to come from the Old English word for witch.
Wow, that's fascinating. So the very tree where Bella was found has a connection to witchcraft built right into its name.
Exactly, and that ties in with the whole Hand of Glory theory we discussed earlier, which suggests there might be an occult element to the crime.
It's like pieces of a puzzle fitting together, although in a very eerie and unsettling way.
And then there's Witchbury Hill, which overlooks Hagley Woods. It's supposedly the site of an ancient hill fort, and local legends are full of stories about witches' ghosts and mysterious events.
So the whole area surrounding where Bella was found is practically overflowing with folklore and supernatural tales. It's no wonder this case has taken on such a mythical quality in people's minds.
And it makes you think, could there be a connection between the real-life mystery of Bella's death and the ancient legends of the area?
That's a very interesting thought.
There's another local legend that really stood out to me. It's the story of the Black Monk of Hagley, a shadowy figure that's said to haunt the woods.
Okay, now that's sending chills down my spine. Tell me more.
Oh, there are different versions of the story, but the main idea is that this monk was either murdered or killed himself in the woods centuries ago, and now his restless spirit wanders the area seeking revenge, or maybe just searching for peace.
So we've got witchcraft ancient rituals, a haunted hill, and now a ghostly monk. This is like something straight out of a horror movie.
I know. And it makes you wonder, could Bella's death somehow be connected to all this dark folklore? Was there some kind of ritualistic element to the crime, as some people have suggested? Or could her killer have been someone driven by superstition or madness inspired by the legends of the woods?
That's a chilling thought, isn't it? The possibility that the lines between reality and folklore might have blurred in this case, that the ancient legends of Hagley Woods might have somehow manifested in a real-life tragedy.
It's almost as if the woods themselves are holding their breath, waiting for someone to unlock their secrets.
It definitely adds a whole other layer of depth to this case. And it makes me think that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are the ones where the real and the imagined, the historical and the legendary all get tangled up together.
You're right. And in Bella's case, it's that very intertwining that makes her story so unforgettable. It's a reminder that the past is never truly past, that the echoes of ancient legends and unsolved mysteries can still haunt us, even in the middle of our modern lives.
Beautifully put. And it reminds us that the human imagination, with its capacity for both wonder and terror, is a powerful force in shaping how we see and understand the world around us.
Okay, so now we've got wartime intrigue, whispers of the occult, a web of conflicting stories, a captivating location that's steeped in folklore, and a mystery that's lasted for generations. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think this is a good place for us to take a break. We've laid out the key elements of the case, explored the different theories, and delved into the historical and folkloric context that makes this mystery so compelling. But before we jump to conclusions, let's take a moment to think about this. What aspects of this case resonate most strongly with you and why?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll invite our listeners to ponder as well. We'll be back with the final part of our deep dives into who put Bella in the Witch Elm right after this. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Bella in the Witch Elm mystery. It's been quite a journey, right? From a wartime discovery to Nazi spies to the spooky folklore of Hagley Woods. And it all comes back to that one question, who put Bella in the witch elm? It really shows how a single question can open up so much history, intrigue, and curiosity.
It really speaks to the power of a good mystery, doesn't it? How it can just pull you in and make you question everything. It's like we all become detectives trying to piece together a story that's been hidden by time.
And you mentioned earlier how the My Favorite Murder hosts revisited the case after a few years. Did they come up with any new insights?
What really stood out to me was how their revisiting showed just how much Bella's story still resonates with people. They admitted that even after all their research and discussions, they kept coming back to this case hoping for some kind of resolution, some closure.
It's like we can't let go of the idea that there might be an answer out there, that someone somewhere holds the key to this whole thing.
And that hope, that refusal to let the story fade away, it's powerful. It reminds us that even when we don't have answers, we still have to keep searching for the truth, to honor the victim, and to keep fighting for justice.
You know, we've talked a lot about the war, the spies, the folklore, but what about Bella herself? Who was she, and how did she end up in that tree?
That's the question, isn't it? And unfortunately, we may never know for sure. We have these little glimpses into her life, the clothes, the wedding ring, the taffeta in her mouth, which makes you think she might have been gagged. But it's not enough. It's like trying to put together a puzzle when half the pieces are missing.
I remember My Favorite Murder hosts talking about how in true crime stories, the victims often become just a name or a case file. They wanted to make sure Bella was remembered as a person.
That's so important. It's easy to get caught up in the sensationalism and forget that there was a real human being at the center of this. Bella had a life, hopes, dreams, relationships, and all of that was taken from her.
And by keeping her story alive, by continuing to ask questions and search for answers, we can honor her memory and make sure she's not just a footnote in some wartime mystery.
I love that. And it makes me wonder, what if the key to solving this whole thing isn't in the big stories about war or espionage, but in the small details, the overlooked clues, the things that have been dismissed or forgotten over time?
That's a really interesting thought.
Yeah.
What if the answer has been right in front of us all along, just waiting for someone to make a connection that no one else has made?
Maybe it's a tiny detail in a historical record, a family story that's been passed down, or even an object that's been hidden away in an attic and just recently rediscovered. There are so many possibilities, and that's what keeps the hope alive.
So for our final thought on this deep dive, what if the answer to who put Bella in the witch elm is closer than we think? What if it's right there waiting for someone to see it? Someone with a fresh perspective, a sharp eye, or maybe just a bit of luck.
It's a tantalizing thought, and I hope it inspires our listeners to keep digging, to keep asking questions, and to never give up on the search for truth. Even when it seems impossible, the smallest clue can sometimes lead to the biggest breakthrough.
And you never know. Maybe one of our listeners has the missing piece of the puzzle. Maybe they have a family story, a local legend, or even just a hunch that could finally solve this case. We encourage you to share your thoughts and theories with us and with everyone. Keep the conversation going and never underestimate the power of a single voice to shed light on a mystery that has stumped so many for so long.
Sometimes the most enduring mysteries are solved not through some big dramatic revelation, but through the patient and persistent work of piecing together seemingly insignificant fragments, until finally the truth is revealed, a truth that was there all along just waiting to be discovered. And that's what makes the pursuit of truth, even when it feels out of reach, so worthwhile.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll leave you to think about the mysteries of Hagley Woods and the enduring question of who put Bella in the witch elm. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time to explore more of the fascinating and the unknown.